If you're looking for a hero in this story, keep scrolling. I'm not the guy who forgives and forgets. I'm the one your mother warned you about, right after she finished crying over men just like me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Ethan Vaughn, and 24 hours ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Successful car restoration business, beautiful wife, nice house in Lakeview, Illinois. The American dream wrapped up in a bow made of lies and betrayal. The night before everything went to hell, I was in my workshop, elbow deep in the engine of a 1967 Mustang Fastback. The smell of motor oil and metal polish had always been my therapy. My phone buzzed against the workbench. Don't forget to wear something nice tomorrow. Big night for us. Clara. Us. Like I was the garnish on her career salad. Clara was celebrating the grand opening of her new law firm partnership. After 15 years of marriage, I'd watched her climb the ladder with the determination of a woman possessed. She'd started as a junior associate and clawed her way to senior partner, stepping on anyone who got in her way. I should have seen the signs earlier. The late nights that became later. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The way she'd started looking at me like I was furniture that no longer matched her decor. But I was busy building my own empire. Vaughn Classic Restorations had grown from a 2-car garage operation to the premier vintage car restoration shop in the Chicago suburbs. I employed 12 people and had a waiting list 6 months long. Not bad for a guy who started with nothing but calloused hands and a dream. The next evening, I put on my best suit, the charcoal gray Armani that Clara had bought me for our anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was wearing her gift to what would become my execution. The venue was spectacular. Clara had rented the top floor of the Millennium Tower downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. The guest list read like a who's who of Chicago's legal and political elite. Champagne flowed like water, and the catered spread probably cost more than most people's cars. I nursed a whiskey and watched Clara work the room. She was in her element, stunning in a red dress that hugged every curve. Her laugh carried across the room as she charmed clients and colleagues alike. For a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her 20 years ago. That's when I noticed him. Justin Blake stood at Clara's side like a well-dressed shadow. He was maybe 35, with the kind of polished good looks that came from expensive grooming and a gym membership. His suit probably cost more than my car payment, and he wore it with the confidence of a man who'd never worked a day of manual labor in his life. I'd met Justin a few times over the past year. Clara had described him as her protégé, a brilliant young lawyer she was mentoring. What she hadn't mentioned was the way his hand lingered on her lower back when he thought no one was looking, or how their conversations seemed to require standing uncomfortably close to each other. Ladies and gentlemen, Clara's voice cut through the party chatter. She stood near the windows, champagne glass raised, commanding the room's attention with practiced ease. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate this incredible milestone. The crowd quieted, turning toward her with the reverence reserved for Chicago's power players. This partnership represents everything I've worked toward for the past 15 years. It's been a long journey, filled with challenges and sacrifices, but I couldn't have done it without the support of so many people in this room. Her eyes found mine across the crowded space. For a split second, I thought she might actually acknowledge the years I'd supported her dreams, the nights I'd held her when she cried over lost cases, the way I'd believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Instead, she smiled that practiced courtroom smile and continued, which brings me to something I need to share with all of you tonight. Something that marks not just a professional new beginning, but a personal one as well. My blood turned cold. The whiskey in my hand suddenly tasted like ash. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. The kind lawyers use for important documents. The kind that change lives. Ethan, darling, could you come here, please? Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt like a deer caught in headlights, but I forced my legs to move. The crowd parted as I made my way toward my wife, their faces a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed excitement. Nothing thrills rich people more than watching someone else's drama unfold. Ethan has been such an important part of my journey, Clara said as I reached her side. Her voice carried that false warmth she used with difficult clients. He helped me get this far, and I'll always be grateful for that. She handed me the envelope. My hands shook slightly as I took it, and I prayed no one else noticed. But sometimes, in order to truly soar, you have to let go of the things that are holding you back. I opened the envelope, though I already knew what I'd find inside. Divorce papers, signed, sealed, and delivered in front of 200 of Chicago's most influential people. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Camera phones appeared as if by magic, capturing my humiliation for posterity. I could already see the headlines. Power attorney dumps husband at partnership celebration. But Clara wasn't finished. I know this seems sudden, but Ethan and I have been growing apart for some time now. We want different things. I'm ready to embrace the future, and that means making some difficult decisions about the past. Justin stepped closer to Clara, his hand finding the small of her back. The gesture was subtle, but unmistakable. Half the room gasped again. The other half started typing furiously on their phones. I stood there, divorce papers in my hands, watching my wife publicly humiliate me while her lover smirked beside her. The whispers grew louder, and I caught fragments of conversations. How long has this been going on? Poor bastard never saw it coming. She's got balls, I'll give her that. That's when I heard it. Clara's voice, lower now but still audible to those standing nearby. She was talking to her inner circle, 3 other female lawyers who'd always treated me like I was beneath their notice. Honestly, I should have done this years ago. Ethan was like training wheels, necessary when I was learning to ride, but eventually you have to take them off if you want to go fast. The women laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Justin joined in, adding his own observation. Some men are stepping stones, others are stumbling blocks. The trick is knowing which is which. Something inside me snapped, not into rage, that would come later, into cold, calculating fury, the kind that doesn't explode outward but burns inward, forging plans in the heat of betrayal. I looked down at the divorce papers, then back at Clara. She was watching me expectantly, probably hoping for tears or anger or some other display of weakness she could use to justify her actions. Instead, I smiled. "Well," I said, loud enough for the nearest groups to hear, "I guess this explains why you've been working so many late nights lately." Clara's face flushed slightly, but she maintained her composure. I folded the papers and slipped them into my jacket pocket. "I'll have my lawyer look these over and get back to you." Then I did something that clearly wasn't in Clara's script. I leaned in and kissed her cheek, whispering just loud enough for Justin to hear. "Thank you for the heads up about what you really think of me. It's going to make the next few weeks very interesting." I turned and walked toward the exit, ignoring the buzz of conversation that followed in my wake. As I reached the elevator, I heard Justin's voice behind me. "Hey, Ethan." I turned. He was standing a few feet away, that smug smile still plastered on his pretty face. "No hard feelings, right? You were a good stepping stone. Clara needed someone stable while she built her career, but now she needs someone who can keep up with her." The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. I stepped inside and turned to face him. "You know what, Justin? You're absolutely right. I was a stepping stone. But here's the thing about stepping stones. Once you're done with them, they can become stumbling blocks." The doors closed on his confused expression. As the elevator descended, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. With a few taps, I canceled the wire transfer I'd authorized that morning, a $20 million investment in Clara's new firm. the money that was supposed to fund their expansion, their new office space, their ambitious plans for the future. My phone started buzzing immediately. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails. Word traveled fast in Chicago's legal community, especially when that much money suddenly disappeared. By the time I reached the parking garage, I had 46 missed calls. I got in my car and drove home, leaving my soon-to-be ex-wife to explain to her partners why their major investor had just vanished into thin air. Let them sweat. The next morning brought a media circus to my doorstep. 3 news vans, 2 gossip bloggers, and a photographer from Chicago Magazine had set up camp outside my house by 7 a.m. Apparently, a powerful attorney publicly divorcing her blue-collar husband while announcing her affair was exactly the kind of story that sold papers. I ignored them and went to my workshop. If there's one thing I've learned in 42 years of life, it's that work is the best medicine for a broken heart. Or in my case, a heart that had been surgically removed and fed to the wolves on live television. My shop manager, Tony Castellano, was already there when I arrived. Tony had been with me for 8 years, ever since I'd hired him away from a dealership that didn't appreciate his talent. He was working on a 1969 Camaro SS, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere. "Boss," he said, without looking up from the engine. "You okay? I saw the news this morning." "Define okay," I said, grabbing my coffee mug and filling it from the pot Tony always had ready. "My wife publicly humiliated me in front of half of Chicago's power structure, announced she's been cheating on me with some pretty boy lawyer, and handed me divorce papers like she was serving hors d'oeuvres. But hey, the coffee's good." Tony finally looked up, his weathered face creased with concern. "What are you going to do?" "Right now, I'm going to work on that Mustang. After that, I'm going to make some phone calls. Then I'm going to show Clara and her boy Toy what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." My phone had been buzzing non-stop since I'd arrived. Most of the calls were from reporters or gossip columnists, but a few were from people I'd considered friends. I finally answered one from Dave Morrison, a guy I'd known since college. "Jesus Christ, Ethan." Dave's voice was excited, like he was calling to congratulate me on winning the lottery. "I saw the video online. Dude, that was brutal. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, Dave. Thanks for asking." "Listen, man, if you need anything, a place to crash, someone to talk to, whatever, just let me know. This has got to be rough." I appreciated the sentiment, but something in his tone bothered me. There was an undercurrent of glee, like he was enjoying my misfortune a little too much. "I appreciate that, Dave, really. So, what's the story with this Justin guy? How long has that been going on?" And there it was. Dave wasn't calling out of concern. He was calling for gossip. He wanted details he could share at his next dinner party, turning my pain into entertainment. "I've got to go, Dave. Thanks for calling." I hung up and turned off my phone. If I was going to get through this, I needed space to think and plan. The morning passed quietly. Tony and I worked on our respective projects, the familiar rhythm of restoration work, providing a temporary balm for my wounded pride. But around noon, the peace was shattered by the arrival of my 18-year-old daughter, Sophie. Sophie had inherited Clara's beauty and ambition, along with an entitled attitude that made my teeth ache. She'd been away at Northwestern, studying pre-law, following in her mother's footsteps with the single-minded determination of someone who'd never faced real adversity. She stormed into the workshop like a tornado in designer jeans and a university sweatshirt that probably cost more than Tony made in a week. "Dad, what the hell is wrong with you?" Tony wisely found something urgent to do in the office, leaving us alone in the main work area. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How are classes going?" "Don't sweetheart me. I've had reporters calling me all morning asking for comments about Mom's divorce announcement. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I set down my wrench and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. When had she become so much like her mother? When had that sweet little girl who used to help me wash cars turned into this cold, calculating young woman? Embarrassing for who, Sophie? You or me? For our whole family. Mom is trying to build something important, and you're making it all about your hurt feelings. My hurt feelings? I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. Sophie, your mother announced our divorce in front of 200 people while standing next to her lover. She called me a stepping stone. How exactly am I the bad guy here? Sophie crossed her arms, a gesture I'd seen Clara make 1,000 times when she was preparing to deliver a devastating argument. Mom outgrew you, Dad. That's not her fault. She's accomplished, successful, important. You fix old cars for rich people. Can you really blame her for wanting more? The words hit me like a physical blow. This was my daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose college tuition I'd paid without complaint. Is that really what you think of me? I think you're bitter because Mom became something bigger than you ever imagined. And instead of being proud of her, you're trying to drag her down. Sophie, I supported your mother through law school. I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for her education while she studied. I celebrated every promotion, every victory, every success. I was proud of her. I loved her. Past tense, Sophie said coldly. That's the problem. Mom needed someone who could love who she's becoming, not just who she used to be. I stared at my daughter, seeing Clara's influence in every word, every gesture. They'd had this conversation before. This wasn't Sophie's spontaneous reaction. This was a rehearsed argument. And Justin can do that? Sophie's cheeks flushed slightly. Justin understands Mom's world. He's sophisticated, educated, ambitious. He's going places. Unlike your old man, the grease monkey. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Sophie sighed, suddenly looking older than her 18 years. Dad, I love you. But you have to accept that sometimes people grow apart. Mom tried to make it work, but you two want different things now. When did you become such an expert on marriage? When I watched my parents' marriage fall apart while one of them was too stubborn to admit it wasn't working. I turned back to the Mustang, unable to look at my daughter anymore. Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Your mother made sure of that last night. Dad, I think you should go, Sophie. I've got work to do. I heard her heels click on the concrete floor as she walked toward the door. She paused before leaving. Mom said you canceled the investment in her firm. That's petty, Dad, and it's going to hurt a lot of people who don't deserve it. I didn't turn around. Your mother made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. After Sophie left, I called my lawyer, Patricia Hayes. Pat was a tough-as-nails divorce attorney who'd built her reputation destroying cheating spouses in court. If Clara wanted a war, she'd picked the wrong enemy. Ethan. Pat's voice was warm but professional. I saw the news. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Pat. Get angry. I want you to go through those divorce papers with a microscope. Find every loophole, every advantage, every way to make Clara regret the way she handled this. I can do that. But Ethan, you should know, public humiliation doesn't usually play well in court. Judges don't like drama. Then we won't give them drama. We'll give them facts. Cold, hard, expensive facts. I spent the rest of the afternoon making phone calls. Not to reporters or friends, but to business contacts. People who owed me favors, who respected my work, who understood loyalty. By 5 o'clock, I'd accomplished 3 things. I'd hired the best private investigator in Chicago to dig into Clara's affairs. I'd quietly reached out to several of her major clients to express my concerns about the stability of her new firm, and I'd started the process of reclaiming every asset that was legally mine. The house was in both our names, but I'd paid the down payment with money from my business. The cars in our garage, including Clara's beloved BMW, were registered to my company as tax write-offs. The vacation home in Wisconsin was a gift from my late father, deeded solely in my name. Clara had been so focused on her career that she'd never paid attention to the financial details. She'd left all of that to me, trusting that I'd always be there to handle the boring stuff while she conquered the legal world. That trust was about to cost her everything. My phone rang as I was locking up the shop. The caller ID showed Clara's name. "Hello, Clara." "Ethan, we need to talk." "I thought we did that last night. Very publicly, as I recall." "Don't be childish. You know what I mean." "Actually, I don't. You made your position pretty clear. I'm the training wheels you don't need anymore, remember?" There was a pause. When Clara spoke again, her voice had lost some of its confidence. "You canceled the investment." "I did. That money was promised to the firm. My partners are counting on it." "Your partners should have thought about that before they let you use their grand opening as a venue for your personal drama." "Ethan, please. This is bigger than just us. There are other people involved. Employees, clients, contracts that depend on that funding. Funny how you didn't think about other people when you decided to humiliate me in front of half of Chicago." "I'm sorry about that. I could have handled it better." It was the first apology I'd heard from her, but it felt hollow, calculated. She was in damage control mode now, trying to minimize the fallout from her public spectacle. "Yes, you could have, but you didn't, and now we both have to live with the consequences." "What do you want, Ethan? Name your price." "My price?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Clara, you can't afford my price. You spent 15 years convincing me that I wasn't good enough for you, and last night you proved it to the world. The price for that kind of humiliation is higher than your new firm will ever be worth. So what happens now? Now you get to find out what it's like to build something without me holding you up. Good luck with that." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I sat in my empty house, drinking bourbon and planning my next move. Clara thought she was so smart, so sophisticated, so much better than the blue-collar guy who'd loved her since college. She was about to learn that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of her career. The next few days brought a steady stream of revelations, each one more damaging than the last. My private investigator, a former FBI agent named Rachel Stone, worked with the efficiency of a surgeon and the discretion of a priest. What she uncovered about Clara's affairs made my stomach turn. Justin wasn't the first. He wasn't even the second. "Your wife has been remarkably careless," Rachel said, sliding a thick folder across my kitchen table. Text messages, hotel receipts, credit card statements. She documented her infidelity like she was keeping a diary. I flipped through the evidence, my anger growing with each page. There was Marcus Hoffman, a federal judge Clara had been seeing 2 years ago. David Chen, a client whose divorce she'd handled while sleeping with him. And now Justin, the golden boy, who thought he'd won the prize. "How many people know about this?" I asked. "More than you'd think. Your wife's circle of friends. They've been covering for her, creating alibis, even helping coordinate meetings. They think it's all very sophisticated, very Sex and the City." Clara's circle. 4 women who'd climbed the Chicago legal ladder together, stepping on anyone who got in their way. Miranda Walsh, the prosecutor who'd never met a camera she didn't like. Samantha Ross, the corporate lawyer who specialized in hostile takeovers. Victoria Stone, the family law attorney who'd made a fortune destroying marriages. And leading them all, my soon-to-be ex-wife. They called themselves the Circle, like they were some kind of secret society instead of a group of middle-aged women having affairs and covering for each other's indiscretions. "I want you to keep digging," I told Rachel. "Find everything. Every affair, every lie, every dirty secret they've been keeping. That's going to be expensive. I don't care what it costs." While Rachel worked her magic, I focused on dismantling Clara's carefully constructed world. It started small, a word here, a concern there, planted in the right ears at the right time. I had lunch with Robert Jameson, the CEO of a manufacturing company that had Clara's firm on retainer. Robert and I had known each other for years. I'd restored his father's 1955 Thunderbird, and we'd become friends in the process. "Bob, I need to ask you a favor," I said over steaks at his club. "It's about Clara's firm." "Ethan, I'm sorry about what happened. That was a hell of a way to find out about a divorce." "Thanks. But that's not why I'm here. I'm worried about the firm's stability. The way Clara handled our separation shows a serious lack of judgment. I'm concerned about what that might mean for her clients." Robert frowned. "What kind of concerns?" "Financial irregularities, questionable ethical decisions, the kind of things that could expose her clients to liability if they came to light." I wasn't lying, exactly. Clara's affairs with clients and judges were serious ethical violations. If the state bar found out, she could be disbarred. Any cases she'd worked on could be called into question. "Are you saying I should be worried about our account?" "I'm saying you might want to have your in-house counsel review your relationship with the firm, just to be safe." By the end of the week, 3 major clients had quietly moved their business elsewhere. Clara's partners were starting to panic, and the gossip mill was working overtime. But I was just getting started. My next target was Justin Blake himself. Rachel's investigation had revealed some interesting details about Clara's golden boy. He wasn't quite the blue blood prince he pretended to be. His expensive tastes were funded by credit cards and family money, and he had a gambling problem that he'd been hiding from everyone, including Clara. I decided to pay him a visit at his gym, an upscale boxing club downtown where rich guys went to pretend they were tough. I'd been boxing since I was 16, first in the Army and later at Max Russo's gym on the South Side. Max was an ex-cop who taught me that the best way to handle a bully was to hit back twice as hard. Justin was working the heavy bag when I arrived, his form sloppy and inefficient. He was wearing designer workout gear that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but he moved like someone who'd never been in a real fight. "Nice form," I said, approaching the bag. "Mind if I give you some pointers?" Justin stopped punching and turned toward me, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "Same thing you are, I imagine. Working out some frustration." Justin glanced around nervously. The gym was mostly empty, just a few other guys scattered around the equipment, no audience for whatever was about to happen. "Look, about the other night." "What about it?" I interrupted. "You made your position pretty clear. I was a stepping stone, you're the future. Simple as that." "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did. You meant every word. And you know what? I respect that. At least you were honest about being a snake." Justin's face flushed red. "I'm not going to stand here and let you insult me." "Then don't stand there. Do something about it." I nodded toward the boxing ring in the center of the gym. "You want to settle this like men, or are you only tough when you're stealing other men's wives?" Justin looked at the ring, then back at me. I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was younger, taller, probably thought his expensive personal trainer had taught him how to fight. "You're on," he said. We climbed into the ring, and I could already see I was going to enjoy this. Justin moved like he'd been taught by someone who'd learned boxing from YouTube videos. All flash, no substance. The first round was almost embarrassing. Justin threw wild haymakers that missed by inches while I picked him apart with jabs and body shots. By the second round, he was breathing hard and bleeding from his nose. "Had enough?" I asked during a break. "Go to hell," Justin gasped. The third round ended with Justin flat on his back, staring at the ceiling while I stood over him. The few other gym members who'd gathered to watch were shaking their heads in disgust. "Here's some free advice," I said, pulling off my gloves. "Next time you want to steal a man's wife, make sure you can back up your mouth." I left Justin lying in the ring and walked out of the gym. By evening, word of his humiliation had spread through Chicago's legal community like wildfire. Clara called me that night, furious. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed into the phone. You beat up Justin at his gym! I didn't beat him up. We sparred. He agreed to it. Ask anyone who was there. He's got a black eye and a split lip. Then maybe he should learn how to box before he challenges someone to a fight. He didn't challenge you. Actually, he did. Right after he called me a stepping stone and said you needed a real man. Funny how he didn't mention that part. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Clara's legal mind working, trying to figure out if she had any recourse. This has to stop, Ethan. You're making yourself look pathetic. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I'm making Justin look pathetic. There's a difference. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You humiliated me in public, so now I'm returning the favor. You want to play games? Let's play games. And what about Sophie? What about our daughter? Do you think she wants to see her parents destroying each other? Sophie made her position clear. She thinks you outgrew me, and I should just accept it. So I'm accepting it. I'm accepting that the woman I loved is gone, and in her place is someone I don't even recognize. Ethan, good night, Clara. Give my regards to Justin. Tell him I said ice helps with the swelling. I hung up and poured myself another bourbon. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of people living their lives, pursuing their dreams, believing in love and loyalty and all the things I'd once believed in. But I wasn't one of them anymore. I was something else now. Something harder, colder, more focused. I was a man with nothing left to lose and a very specific set of skills. Clara and her circle were about to find out what that meant. 2 weeks after the boxing gym incident, Rachel Stone delivered the intelligence I'd been waiting for. She arrived at my house on a rainy Thursday evening with a briefcase full of evidence that would destroy Clara's world. Your wife and her circle have been very busy, Rachel said, spreading photographs and documents across my dining room table. And very sloppy. The evidence was damning. Hotel receipts showing Clara's affairs going back 3 years. Text messages between the circle members coordinating alibis and cover stories. Financial records showing Justin's gambling debts and the money Clara had been quietly funneling to him from client accounts. But the most interesting discovery was about Victoria Stone, Clara's closest friend in the circle. Victoria was married to a prominent city councilman and had built her reputation as a family values advocate. What she hadn't advertised was her ongoing affair with her 25-year-old paralegal. This is enough to destroy all of them, I said, studying the photographs. It gets better, Rachel replied, pulling out another folder. Miranda Walsh has been leaking information about ongoing prosecutions to defense attorneys in exchange for favors. Samantha Ross has been insider trading based on information from her corporate clients. And your wife has been billing clients for hours she spent in hotel rooms with her lovers. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of their corruption. These women had presented themselves as pillars of the legal community while systematically betraying every principle they claimed to uphold. What do you want to do with this information? Rachel asked. I want to use it surgically, one cut at a time, until they're all bleeding out. I started with Victoria Stone. Her husband, Councilman Richard Stone, was up for re-election and had built his campaign around family values and moral leadership. The revelation that his wife was cheating with an employee young enough to be her son would destroy both their careers. But I didn't go to the media. That would be too crude, too obvious. Instead, I arranged for the evidence to find its way to Richard Stone's political opponents. Let them decide how to use it. The story broke on a Friday morning. Family values councilman's wife in affair scandal. The photos were devastating. Victoria and her young lover entering and leaving hotels, kissing in parking garages, groping each other in her office after hours. Richard Stone held a press conference that afternoon, announcing his withdrawal from the race and his separation from his wife. Victoria's law practice, which specialized in high-profile divorce cases, lost 6 clients in one day. Clara called me that evening, her voice shaking with rage. Did you do this to Victoria? Do what? Don't play dumb with me, Ethan. The photos, the story, this has your fingerprints all over it. Clara, I'm a car mechanic. How would I get photographs of Victoria's affair? You hired someone. Did I? Can you prove that? There was silence on the line. Clara was smart enough to know that admitting she suspected me would also admit that Victoria had been having an affair, which would implicate the entire circle in covering it up. This is war, she finally said. No, Clara. War would be if I released everything I know about you and your friends all at once. This is just me returning the favor. You wanted to humiliate me publicly. Now you know how it feels. What do you want? I want you to understand what you've lost. I want you to realize that the man you called a stepping stone was actually the foundation that held your world together. And I want you to watch that world crumble, piece by piece. The next target was Miranda Walsh, the prosecutor with political ambitions. Rachel's investigation had uncovered evidence that Miranda had been leaking information about ongoing cases to defense attorneys in exchange for sexual favors and political support. This time, I went directly to the FBI. Their public corruption unit was very interested in Rachel's evidence, especially the recorded phone calls and text messages showing Miranda coordinating with defense attorneys to throw cases. Miranda was arrested on a Tuesday morning as she arrived at her office. The perp walk was captured by every news camera in Chicago, showing the once powerful prosecutor in handcuffs, her career and reputation destroyed in a single moment. Clara's circle was starting to panic. Victoria was in hiding, her marriage and career in ruins. Miranda was facing federal charges and disbarment. Samantha Ross was next, and she knew it. Samantha tried to get ahead of the story by quietly resigning from her firm and moving to Florida. But Rachel's evidence followed her there, finding its way to the SEC investigators who'd been building a case against insider trading in Chicago's legal community. Within a month, 3 of Clara's 4 closest friends were facing criminal charges, civil lawsuits, or professional ruin. The circle that had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, was collapsing like a house of cards. But I wasn't done with Clara herself. Not by a long shot. The final phase of my plan required patience and perfect timing. Clara's law firm was struggling without the investment I'd canceled, and the scandals surrounding her friends had scared away more clients. She was vulnerable, desperate, and making mistakes. That's when I struck at her relationship with Justin. Rachel had discovered that Justin's gambling debts were worse than we'd initially thought. He owed money to some very unforgiving people, and Clara had been using client funds to pay his debts. It was embezzlement, pure and simple, and it would destroy her career if it came to light. But instead of exposing her immediately, I decided to let her dig her own grave a little deeper. I arranged for Justin's creditors to increase the pressure. A word here, a suggestion there, and suddenly Justin's gambling debts became more urgent. Clara was forced to steal more money from client accounts to keep her lover afloat. Meanwhile, I was quietly gathering evidence of every transaction, every forged document, every lie she told to cover her tracks. Rachel had planted surveillance equipment in Clara's office and home, capturing conversations that would seal her fate. The trap was set. All I needed now was the perfect moment to spring it. That moment came sooner than I'd expected, in the form of a charity gala that Clara couldn't afford to miss. The annual Chicago Legal Foundation dinner was the biggest social event of the year for the city's legal community. Clara would be there, along with what remained of her circle, trying to maintain the facade that everything was fine. I bought a table at the gala, right in the center of the ballroom where everyone could see it. Then I sent out invitations to some very special guests, journalists, prosecutors, and several of Clara's former clients who'd been asking uncomfortable questions about their missing money. The stage was set for the final act of my revenge. Clara thought she was attending a charity dinner. She was actually walking into her own execution. The Chicago Legal Foundation Gala was held at the Palmer House Hilton, in a ballroom that had hosted presidents and celebrities. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables filled with the city's legal elite, all dressed in their finest attire and pretending they hadn't noticed how many of their colleagues had fallen from grace in recent months. I arrived early, wearing a new tuxedo that had cost more than most people's monthly salary. If this was going to be my final performance, I wanted to look the part. My table was positioned perfectly, close enough to the stage to be visible to everyone in the room, but far enough back that I could observe without being the center of attention. At least, not yet. Clara arrived 20 minutes after me, stunning in a black evening gown that hugged her figure perfectly. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, air-kissing acquaintances and pretending her world wasn't collapsing around her. Justin followed in her wake like a well-dressed puppy, his face still showing faint bruises from our boxing match. What was left of the circle clustered around Clara like survivors of a shipwreck. Victoria Stone was notably absent. She was in rehab, according to the gossip columns, trying to salvage what remained of her marriage. Miranda Walsh was under house arrest awaiting trial. That left only Samantha Ross, who looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past month. I watched Clara work the room, noting how many people avoided her gaze or cut their conversations short. The legal community was small and word traveled fast. Everyone knew about the missing client funds, even if they couldn't prove it yet. The dinner portion of the evening passed without incident. Speeches were made, awards were given, and checks were written for various charitable causes. Clara even managed a smile when she was introduced as one of the foundation's board members, though I could see the strain in her eyes. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, "we have a special presentation this evening from one of our longtime supporters, Ethan Vaughn of Vaughn Classic Restorations." The spotlight found me at my table, and I stood to polite applause. Clara's face went white as she realized what was happening. I walked to the podium, taking my time, letting the tension build. The room was quiet now, everyone sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Thank you," I said, adjusting the microphone. I wasn't originally scheduled to speak tonight, but recent events have given me some things I need to share with this community. I could see Clara at her table, frozen like a deer in headlights. Justin was whispering urgently in her ear, probably telling her to leave, but it was too late for that. Every eye in the room was on me now. Most of you know that my wife recently announced our divorce in a very public way. What you might not know is the story behind that announcement, and what it reveals about the state of ethics in our legal community. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the usual charity gala speech, and everyone knew it. For 15 years, I supported my wife's career. I paid for her education, celebrated her successes, and stood by her through every challenge. I believed in her, even when she stopped believing in herself. I paused, letting my words sink in. What I didn't know was that she was using our marriage as a cover for a series of affairs that violated every ethical standard of her profession. Affairs with clients, with judges, with colleagues. Affairs that compromised cases, influenced verdicts, and betrayed the trust of everyone in this room. The murmurs grew louder. I could see people turning to look at Clara, who was now standing at her table, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Ethan, stop this right now," she called out, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Stop what, Clara? Stop telling the truth? Stop exposing the corruption that you and your friends have been covering up for years?" I nodded to Rachel Stone, who was seated at a table near the back of the room. She stood and began distributing folders to the journalists and prosecutors I'd invited. In those folders, you'll find evidence of embezzlement, bribery, insider trading, and prosecutorial misconduct. You'll find records of client funds being used to pay gambling debts, of cases being thrown in exchange for sexual favors, and of a conspiracy to cover up these crimes that reaches into the highest levels of Chicago's legal establishment. The room erupted in chaos. Reporters were opening folders and taking pictures. Prosecutors were making phone calls. Clara was shouting something I couldn't hear over the noise, but I wasn't finished. Clara Vaughn has stolen over $200,000 from client accounts to support her lover's gambling addiction. Miranda Walsh threw at least 6 cases in exchange for political support and sexual favors. Samantha Ross made millions through insider trading based on privileged client information, and all of it was covered up by a group of women who called themselves the Circle and thought they were above the law. Justin chose that moment to try to be a hero. He started moving toward the stage, probably planning to physically remove me from the podium, but I'd anticipated this. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Justin," I said into the microphone. "Not unless you want everyone here to see the video of you begging Clara for money to pay off your bookie, or the recordings of you promising to marry her as soon as she got rid of her stepping-stone husband." Justin stopped dead in his tracks, his face going pale. "That's right, folks. The great love affair that broke up my marriage was really just a business transaction. Clara got a young lover to make her feel important, and Justin got a sugar mama to pay his debts. Very romantic." Clara was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as cameras flashed around her. The woman who'd humiliated me in front of Chicago's elite was now experiencing the same treatment, magnified by the evidence of her crimes. "The truth is," I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the chaos, "Clara was right about one thing. She did outgrow me. She outgrew honesty, integrity, loyalty, and love. She became something I couldn't recognize, something I couldn't respect." I paused, looking directly at her across the crowded ballroom. She wanted me to sign and leave, so I did. But first, I signed her name at the bottom of a disaster. Security guards were moving toward the stage now, but I was already walking away from the podium. My work here was done. As I reached the ballroom doors, I could hear the chaos behind me, reporters shouting questions, prosecutors making arrests, and Clara's voice rising above it all, screaming my name like a curse. I stepped outside into the cool Chicago night, breathing deeply for the first time in months. My phone was already buzzing with calls from reporters, but I ignored them. I'd said everything I needed to say. 3 days later, Clara was arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Justin was charged as an accessory and faced deportation. It turned out his visa status was more complicated than he'd let on. The remaining members of the circle were either in jail, in hiding, or in exile. Sophie called me that afternoon, her voice small and broken. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I know you didn't, sweetheart. Your mother made sure of that. What happens now? Now you finish school, and I rebuild my life. And maybe someday, when you're ready, we can rebuild our relationship too." I'd like that. So would I. 6 months later, I was working in my shop when Tony brought me a newspaper. The headline read, "Corrupt attorney sentenced to 10 years in federal prison." Clara's mugshot stared back at me from the front page, her face haggard and defeated. The woman who'd once commanded boardrooms and courtrooms was now wearing an orange jumpsuit and a number. "You feel bad for her?" Tony asked. I thought about it for a long moment, remembering the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago, the woman who'd shared my dreams and my bed and my life. "I feel bad for who she used to be," I finally said, "but not for who she became." I folded the newspaper and tossed it in the trash, then went back to work on the Mustang. Some things could be restored to their former glory, others were too broken to fix.